Post-apocalyptic is probably my second favorite genre to play in after the sci-fi horror 1-2 combo. I've worked on projects in the past, including a custom RPG system for Post-Apocalyptic. I've been interested in the genre for quite a long time. I remember having a blog in the late 2000s, like 2008 to maybe 2010. That was kind of like a prepper's blog, but it was more about rebuilding society afterwards, using my experience with engineering and farming to start from scratch. I was kind of interested in it. One thing that I am currently a part of is the writing team in a cipher system project that hasn't officially been announced yet, but I can say it does have aspects of post-apocalyptic in it. So I've been once again thinking about the genre in even closer detail. That's when I did some polls on Twitter and Mastodon on what genre to cover first. Post-apoc won by a fair amount. Despite having a ton of points I want to touch upon, I don't want to make this too long of a video, so we're going to focus on some of the bigger points. If you have any other points about running or playing in a post-apocalyptic RPG, leave them down below. I'd love to hear more about it. A warning before I get into this. The post-apocalyptic genre can have some pretty heavy points to it. By its very nature, it touches upon areas that can be triggering and difficult. I don't get into too much detail in this video, but out of necessity, I do need to touch upon them as we talk about the genre. Hunger, thirst, disease, temperature, maybe strange things like radiation, alien nanites, and so on. These are all challenges of the environment. In a post-apocalyptic situation, all the comforts of modern life have been washed away. With danger around every corner, it's almost impossible to even get the basics, like food and water. What supplies you do have are often scavenged from the wreckage of a world that has been lost. Your character will often be on the verge of starving, or frantically searching for medicine to cure an infection, maybe even just desperately hoping to find an extra blanket for those cold nights. Unlike the most common genre of RPGs, fantasy, where monsters and villains are the biggest hurdles, with the environment usually just being traps or something directly related to entities, environments in a post-apoc genre should be much more central to the theme, and one of the more difficult challenges to overcome. Because no matter what caused the apocalypse, scarcity and necessity are the reality of a survivor. One of the main aspects of a post-apoc tale that I lump in with the environment is equipment. That last bit of food, the final drop of water, the only bullet left in your gun, a better backpack that doesn't have a hole in it. No matter what system you're playing, a key aspect to the environment of these tales are reliance on things. Resources, equipment, vehicles, objects. Now, this can be one of the only difficulties in a genre for the more narrative systems. As many of you know, although I play a lot of systems, the Cypher system by Monaco Games is kind of my go-to. However, its equipment and resource management was something I found a little lacking in some areas. That's why I created my Cypher Foundation book. It deals with crafting, repairing, and upgrading items, cinematic style resources, community creation and management, and more. It's a pay what you want, so if you play Cypher and you want to get a more robust set of systems for your equipment and resources, you can grab it for free. I don't normally plug my own stuff as harshly as that, but it really does kind of help out with the post-apocalyptic gameplay, so it's probably worth at least grabbing. It doesn't cost you anything. One final note on the environment. Before the apocalypse, there were plenty of disasters. Floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, fires, plagues. Just because a particular event was the tipping point, that doesn't mean that the world only focuses on this one disaster and the rest have stopped. The Earth is going on just like it did before. The same things that caused loss of life previously are still there, just waiting to happen. Post-apocalyptic scenarios likely have some sort of foe or enemy. Zombies, aliens, robots, mutants, or even just other human people. It's important to maintain a constant threat and presence from whatever these foes are. Civilization has fallen. There's no one to keep things in check, and no one is safe. Not now, not ever. Every corner, every shadow, every unopened door, these are the unknown places, and in the broken world, the unknown holds mind-bogglingly terrifying possibilities. Even worse, there are also other survivors. They're going through the same things you are. Scarcity, necessity, and desperation. And when people get desperate, the worst of humankind emerges. there's a good chance that most of the people who survive the apocalypse are strong, selfish, mean, or even downright evil. There's a reason they lived when others did not. The kind and the gentle have likely perished long ago, unless they too had someone with these darker traits to carry them along. People are barely contained bundles of tenuous sanity on a good day. End all civilization as we know it and introduce the constant danger, starvation, exhaustion, and trauma. Suddenly, the tenuous glue that holds a person's sanity together starts to fall apart pretty quickly. Over time, the survivors of this new terrible world can become cold and resistant to the terrors that happen around them every day. But that takes time. In the meantime, more and more of the current survivors snap. They just can't take it anymore. Some go crazy and babble in the corner. Others break and start sniping their buddies in a blood-soaked cackling fit. Most just seek to finally end it all and opt out. You can run from enemies. You can find food to satisfy your hunger, but you can't escape your own mind. This is one aspect of the game that is a little more evenly split between your players and game masters. The GM can display these mental issues with NPCs, but depending on the system, it's up to the players to really lean into their own mental and emotional instabilities through their own roleplay. Assuming this is a post-apocalypse and not starting out with the event itself, every character, every NPC, every living thing of any kind in the story has likely lived through intense trauma even before the campaign begins. The apocalypse has happened, and it touched everyone's lives. As a result, when it comes to everyone's mental state, we are all wounded on the inside, and these wounds should shade the way PCs and NPCs see and react to everything they do. Another thing to keep in mind is what terrible things people have had to do to survive. If you've gotten this far and lived this long, likely you've had to do things you didn't want to do. You've had to kill, cheat, steal, and so much worse. Things you had to do out of necessity, not desire. Post-apocalyptic is not a lighthearted genre. It will likely push boundaries and make you feel uncomfortable. It makes us confront our humanity and the things we do if pushed to the breaking point and beyond. When looking at the best post-apocalyptic and horror stories, there's one thing that often makes them better: lack of information. This may sound strange, since most people want to learn everything about what's going on. The GM probably made all sorts of cool little world bits they want to tell their players about. However, it is the sense of mystery, the lack of verified information, that can really spark the imagination. The same tip I'd given when running a horror campaign, since the genres often share aspects with each other. In A Quiet Place, we have no real idea truly where the monsters are coming from. Hell, we barely know anything about them other than that they rely on sound. In Bird Box, it's never even really explained what the big bad evil is at all. It's just an abstract horror that drives you mad if you see it. Something we never see because, well, it would drive us mad. In Reign of Fire, they give a brief explanation, but there's so much more about why there's a dragon, why we've never seen dragons, exactly what's going on, that leaves all these unanswered questions. We just know there's dragons. Dragons are bad. The few times I feel let down in a post-apocalyptic story is when they try to explain too much. Like The Walking Dead. I remember watching the first few seasons at the same time I was reading the initial comic books. The TV show, for some reason, tries to give some science-y sounding explanation fairly early in the series, and I hated it. There was that trip to the lab with the guy explaining about it being a disease and what's going on, and them seeing if they can find a cure and all that bullshit. It felt boring, uninspiring, and meh. Now, it's been a while since I've read the comics, and I only read till a little beyond the point of the prison, but I don't remember this happening in the comics for The Walking Dead. I don't remember things being explained at that point. It left a mystery as to why the zombies were there, how they worked, where it all started, etc. Not knowing made it kind of more interesting. Mystery is important, because when civilizations fall, one of the first shocks people get is suddenly not having a wealth of information at their fingertips. Communication networks clog up and break relatively quickly without maintenance. In a few scenarios, they may even cease immediately because of the event that occurred. As a result, most people don't actually know what's going on. Why did this happen? How did this start? Is everyone this bad off? Is there a safe place I can go? Is there someone out there to help me? What's going on with the government? These are all questions most survivors ask themselves. They are also questions that are rarely answered. Without proper communication, a survivor must rely on hearsay and rumors from other survivors, most of which are lying, crazy, or misinformed themselves. There are plenty of post-apocalyptic stories out there where people have managed to survive the events and finally get a safe and fairly comfortable place to live. These are not good or memorable stories, especially for an RPG. These stories are generally known as the cozy catastrophe, and most writers will say you should stay away from these. A good apocalyptic story still maybe has a faint glimmer of hope, but the interest and challenge comes from the fact that you were trying to survive the end of the f***ing world. It is not easy. It is not comfortable. It is not safe. The post-apocalyptic world is brutal and visceral. It is dangerous and terrifying. But people go on because there's always hope that one day, maybe generations from now, they will do what needs to be done to begin the process of rebuilding once again. A great way to give the right feeling for a post-apoc world is not one of complete death. If everything was dead, then it's stale and not worth being in. It should be a world of decay, of necessity, a place where a story can still happen. Every element of your campaign world should show this theme of stable to decay and deterioration. Structures, objects, society, relationships. It's not dead yet, but it is progressing from sound, healthy, and stable to ruins and chaos. As a GM, or even a player if you're creative with it, introduce elements of life, purity, and innocence so that we can show the progress of decay over time. If it can decay, if it can fall to the entropic impact of the end of the world, it will. Whether that's personal relationships, the building you're staying in, or anything else. Also, and this can depend a little on what caused the apocalypse, but a general rule is not everywhere has decayed at the same rate. Just because one town was literally burned to the ground the first day doesn't mean there's not a small subdivision nearby that was actually relatively untouched. There are survivors that are worse off than you, but there are also some that are better off. There may even be some small pockets of safety, although these rarely last for long. Where your country may have been affected by the event that caused the apocalypse, there's always a chance that other areas were less affected. After all, a small village in Central Africa has likely been affected far less by the fall of Earth's civilizations than central London. An apocalypse affects everyone on Earth, but not equally. One area that we should focus on, particularly that decays quite quickly, the big city. Urban environments need an enormous amount of upkeep. We constantly have workers fixing the roads, sewage, electrical, communications, etc. Without them, things fail, and they fail very quickly. Without cutting it back, it takes less time than you'd think for nature to begin retaking the cities. For more inspiration on how fast nature starts to reclaim urban environments, you can read either published studies about this or books like The World Without Us, which I actually think was a decent book to cover this subject. There's so much more I want to say on this subject. So many elements on how to make this genre work. So many little tips and tricks and everything like this. But I don't want to go on forever. I don't want to make this video last too awfully long because, to be frank, most people's attention spans are not that long these days. I'm probably stretching it already. This is a genre that I think is actually harder to run than something like fantasy. Fantasy has your heroes, your villains, your dungeons, your epic quests. Although shades of grey can creep in, there's a lot more of the moral right and wrong, black and white, heroes and bad guys. Fantasy can be deadly, but you know where the dangers are usually coming from. Post-apocalyptic is a genre that lives entirely in the shades of grey. Confusion, decay, uncomfortable feelings, trauma, subject matter most other genres may not want to touch. Almost anything could get you. Starvation, the zombie around the corner, human raiders' disease. It's a battle against the darkness in your heart just as much as it is against something tangible or even unseen. A person that you saw do some of the most evil and vile things may be someone you have to work with in the future to protect your back out of sheer necessity. So hopefully we've covered at least a few things for the post-apocalyptic genre. I know there's more to talk about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it down below. Let's get some conversation started and some more tips we can throw in. I had a whole extra script on top of this, but once again, the video's getting long enough, and I don't want to get onto it too long. So if we do want to start some conversations on it, feel free, go into the comments below, let's talk about it. Let's get some extra tips. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this video in the future. I know I also want to cover the other genres if I can. Well, that's it for today. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one, eh?
I'm aware of the bonds that were created today. When you told me that sure there's a way. The water's so still, and my pain has gone away. The air is much cleaner after it rains. Follow my love, the scent that's in spring air. Follow the movement to the sun. There's a call for new beginnings here. Let the sorrow of yester disappear. Let your body